Blog Talk Radio.
Hello there. I'd like to begin with a fact. A simple yet shocking fact. It is this. A flood tide of filth is engulfing our country in the form of newsstand obscenity.
We have to think still more profoundly. We have to see that the enormous powers which we now possess, thanks to the scientific and technological advances, shall be used for the benefit of human beings and not for their ultimate degradation.
Truthstream Media with Aaron Dykes and Melissa Melton.
Information gathering on every American.
Human experiments, electronic surveillance, invasion of privacy.
Growing government and corporate power.
We can uncover the truth and we can break their deception for good.
A people plagued by dehumanization.
Loneliness and violence.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're live on September 24th. It's a Tuesday, and we've got a special guest tonight with us on Truthstream Media Live.
Yes, it's Dr. John Hall. He's a medical doctor from San Antonio. He's board-certified diplomat of the American Board of Anesthesiology, and he's the author of A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America. Dr. John, are you there?
I'm here, Melissa.
Hi. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us tonight. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're really busy.
Thanks for breaching the topic. This is something that a lot of the media doesn't want to touch.
Well, actually, that's what I was going to get into because I recently wrote several reports for Truthstream about the Navy Yard shooting because at first, when these major events happen, they're major media events, they're really pushed out there into the mainstream. I don't like to comment on them for a while if I can help it until they play out more because they really try to rile everyone up with the CNN syndrome and the media thing. But once reports came forward that Aaron Alexis, the suspected shooter, had called police 6 weeks earlier and was claiming that microwave weapons were pulsing him and that he was being gang stalked by 3 individuals and he was hearing their voices through the walls, through the ceiling and the floor of his hotel room and caused him to change hotel rooms 3 times. That got my attention instantly because I've done a lot of research into this area and I've heard a lot of the stories and I've had people write me also since I wrote that article, and so I thought if I could get you to come on and talk about this because, I mean, people are scared. We're getting a lot of letters from people telling us their stories, and they're horrifying stories. They're very sad stories, and I just want to hug everybody because I don't know what to tell them what to do. And the saddest part is that, I mean, as much as anybody who's not researched this or doesn't know about this would look at it and go, well, that person's obviously insane. Once you get 5 emails, 10 emails, and they all sound eerily similar, it's very hard to just suddenly think, oh, everyone's just insane. So
yeah, well, that's true. And from a medical point of view, you know, that's exactly the way I looked at it when I became involved with this. And for the life of me, I can't understand why there's not more physicians and especially psychiatrists when invariably a lot of these people end up mandated into seeing a psychiatrist, why they can't look at the same numbers and the same methodology. I mean, these complaints aren't similar. They're exactly the same. I mean, the psychiatrist will try to say, well, it's group delusional disorder that's fed by Internet contact and that you wouldn't have seen this prior to the popularity of the Internet. But, you know, there's a group in Palm Springs that's 60 men that are being attacked, and they're all hearing the same voice. You know, that defies coincidence.
Exactly. Well, your book is called A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America, and people have described it as Kafkaesque. It's a systematic targeting of people, and there's mind control, surveillance, gang stalking, there's even rape, and it's basically a form of technological and psychological terrorism directed upon people. Do you want to get into your book and kind of talk a little bit about how you came about this phenomenon of targeting individuals?
Sure. First, I'll kind of preface that by saying, you know, I am a medical doctor, and I don't want anyone to perceive me as thinking that mental illness doesn't exist and that everybody that complains of hearing voices is a victim of technology. That's certainly not the case. Mental illness does exist and is out there. But how I came across this was a woman in San Antonio who voiced these complaints, and having heard a little bit about the technology and read a little bit about the technology, and knowing this person prior to these complaints, knowing that there was no mental illness and no drug use, involved, decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, especially when she said, I feel like I'm being mind controlled. I'm hearing people talk to me, and I'm, being raped. I said, you know what? There is technology that can do this, and let's see if we can figure it out. So we did some counter surveillance, put some digital audio recorders hidden in her place. Of course, she didn't want video for privacy purposes, but she agreed to audio, so we did audio. And within a week, had people breaking into her place, putting rohypnol, which is a date rape type drug, in her bottled water and other foodstuffs. But the interesting thing about this is how they were getting the drug in her was subliminally controlling her to get the drug in her. And you could hear that on the recordings that, and I saw it for myself when I would visit her a couple of times, and I would see her drink one bottle of water after another, and I said, man, you must be really thirsty. But your fifth bottle of water since I've been here. And she's like, this is my first bottle. And I'm like, oh boy, this girl's controlled. Which is exactly how control looks. If for those of you that have never been around somebody that can be placed in an alternate state of control, you can put a red dot on a white wall, and if they're being controlled to see a white wall, they will not see the red dot. It works that well. So, we had the recorders in place, and, sure enough, and, she was at one state in a drugged state, and people were breaking into the back door of her condo, and she was screaming at them to get out and making animal sounds and, banging dishes around, and was very obviously in a drug state. It didn't even necessarily, it wasn't her personality that was coming through on the recording. There were 3 men and her female next-door neighbor who had been helping surveil her, breaking in the back door and digging around through her stuff to find the recorders that had been buried there that they had obviously seen placed. At one point, one of the girls found one of the recorders, and her mouth is right next to the microphone saying, well, I found it. How do I shut it off? One of the male voices says, just hit some buttons until it goes off. So we counter-surveilled the group that was doing it, had their plate numbers. It came back to be a former FBI agent running a private investigative agency out of San Antonio, who incidentally has been identified independently of me by 2 other people that had been victimized by him. And when we went to complain to the Department of Public Safety, which is kind of like the Texas Highway Patrol, they license PIs, we were told that he had no complaints and had a sterling record. Here, 5 years later, another victim identifies him in a similar type of phenomenon. And I told her, I said, file a formal complaint with the DPS. Now this is, mind you, after I had complained about him, the girl had complained about him, my typist had complained about him, and 2 other people that were involved with the writing of this book had complained about him. When the latest victim, which was just 2 years ago, called to file a formal complaint, she was told he had a sterling record and no complaints had ever been filed. So,
so he's got somebody looking out for him that's above his station. This is what it sounds like to me. So wow. When we couldn't get any law, and trust me, I have a very good working relationship with SAPD. I went to the lieutenant in charge of the sex crimes unit, and this is all in the book. He said if he was hearing this story from anyone else, that he would think they're crazy. But I had put him to sleep for several surgeries. He was a patient of mine. Several of the other officers were patients of mine. He said, you know what? A lot of times the crazier the story, the more true it is. And they investigated it. The problem with our case was she was drugged with rohypnol,
and, you know, had fleeting memories and mostly nightmarish-like states about the sexual assaults, and couldn't actually identify any of the perpetrators. The only thing they could have tried to get this guy for would have been the stalking on her and myself. And at that time, the Texas state laws on stalking were so inept that they said it would be a waste of time. As the police told me, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove in a court of law. And basically we were told he's former FBI, he's a licensed PI, he stalks people for a living, and there's not much you can do. And that's what made me decide to write the book. The names were changed since they couldn't be brought to justice, but I figured the next best thing would be to actually get the story out there by someone that I hope can be perceived as credible, and expose it for other people that may be getting victimized the same way. And lo and behold, the floodgates opened, and probably within a year of publishing the book, I had been contacted by roughly 6,000 other people being victimized the exact same way.
Wow. See, that was going to be my next question. How many people do you think that this affects? I mean, because I've read so many accounts.
Why change the names? Why not go public and expose this person and make a thing out of it and bring it to the media if it's a specific FBI official?
Well, he's ex-FBI for one thing, and the thing you have to remember too, I'm a licensed physician in the state of Texas, and this guy's being protected by the state of Texas. So in order to be able to continue having a livelihood, and my publisher, again, since they weren't actually brought to justice and found guilty of any crime, recommended that the names be slightly changed.
Slightly changed, yeah. Well, yeah. A former FBI official, top FBI official, Ted Gunderson, he's become part of this movement, and he said he believes that this is far too extensive to really be controlled in a private enterprise. That private enterprise is mostly out for financial gain, and obviously that's not really what's coming out of this, and that this is too well organized and too sophisticated and just too broad, and there must be some sort of central command. This must be some kind of a government type of a situation with multiple satellite offices or something, because it's just too broad, too sophisticated. And I know you had mentioned on your site that all it takes is 3 satellites to really blanket the whole world and achieve these kinds of ends. I mean, who do you ultimately think is behind all this stuff? Because it does seem like a very concerted, very large effort.
Yeah, and Ted Gunderson and I were actually fairly good friends before he passed away. Met with him on a number of occasions out in Sacramento. And he's right. At the very heart of it, it's the government. But if you look back at the early MKUltra studies, whenever this type of research was done, typically it was done through a front company or it was guised as legitimate research through a university. And that's to give the government plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability, that's the name of the game.
Exactly. And so while the people I identified and the people that we've identified in other cities look like they're private investigative agencies, the truth of the matter is that, you know, this is technology you and I can't get our hands on. You have to be given access to this. And these groups are given access by the government with what is apparently a carte blanche allowance to victimize people however they see fit, as long as the data gets back to the appropriate agencies, so they can actually see how well it's performing in a long-term scenario. And looking at it from a medical aspect as a physician, looking at any experimentation, the only time you need to run an experiment for greater than 10 years is to see long-term effects. And if this technology in the end is what they're planning on controlling the globe with, the global population, then they're going to need to see, you know, in average, in most instances, how long it takes to get someone to break down, how long it takes to get someone diagnosed as mentally ill, you know, whether or not that this is going to cause any type of leukemias or thyroid cancer or various other ailments, in order to continue concealing it. Because certainly, as you can see from any internet search, there's probably roughly 300,000 victims in the United States complaining about the voices and the attack. Well, if all of a sudden you saw an exponential rise in, you know, in a brain cancer or a type of leukemia then that's going to raise some eyebrows and get some legitimate research going too. And if it comes back that it's from non-ionizing radiation or electromagnetics, then the house of cards may come down based on that. So my gut feeling is that it's long-term experimentation and preparation for a global type of assault with it.
See, Aaron and I were discussing this as well, and that was kind of my thoughts too. Why do you think there's any method to the way that they choose people for this? Or do you think they just...
Yes, there is, and that's where it gets a little complex to explain, and I guess I need to find a better way to explain it, but I've had a hard time explaining this, especially to targeted individuals, because when you hear their stories, almost all of them feel like they have a reason why they're being targeted. And in some of them there are. I mean, I've met with a number of whistleblowers. I've had former reconnaissance office personnel come to San Antonio to talk with me. I've had former NSA people come to talk with me that are being victimized after blowing the whistle on one thing or another. But the majority of the victims are, what we would kind of call nobodies, including, myself and the girl I worked with. Yeah, I'm a physician, but in the broad, scheme of things, being a physician in a small town is, not really that big of a deal. It's not like, they're victimizing political leaders or, Bill Gates or, people like that, or they may be, but we just don't know. But the majority of victims are just the common folk. And there are certain cities where you can see a predilection for one type of victim or one type of victimization. But when you crunch the numbers and you look at the victims as a whole in surveys, and we've done that, most of them are, highly educated, or at least, high school degreed or college degreed people. Most of them are 35 to 55, 70% are female. Most of those females are also reporting sexual assault along with the electronic assault. It doesn't seem to be on a broad scale aimed at one race or one religion or one political belief. But when you break it down by city, like I said, there's 60 men in Palm Springs that are all gay men, that are all hearing the same voice and being viciously attacked with directed energy weapons. The group here in San Antonio seems to use it mostly as a hired out type of technology of, as I put in the book, is one physician who knows this former FBI guy said he was hiding him from his wife in case he wanted to use him against her to make her appear crazy in a divorce. And one of the other victims that's contacted me here was going through a messy divorce from a very affluent person in the suburbs of San Antonio. And, this particular agent was hired to do just that to his ex-wife, draw a mental illness diagnosis on her so she wouldn't have access to her half of the communal property.
Well, that motivation is very sinister. It makes sense. Certainly targeting people who are political or may have secrets or may have either blown the whistle or indicated they want to blow the whistle. You could see why those people would be targeted. But for the people, we hear a lot from loner cases, and that's what's frustrating or mysterious or certainly difficult to understand is why would they systematically target people like that where there's no obvious motivation? I mean, divorce, that's, it seems to be extreme measures, but it's still understandable. I mean, how could people
Aaron
wrap
and
their
I
head
have
around
had
this?
debates about this, so that's where that question comes from.
Well, and the motivation, I can tell you the motivation behind that. And the motive, especially if you look at any of the MK Ultra sub-projects, it was always done on the people who really didn't have the political clout or the financial clout to really do anything about it. Especially MK Ultra, they specifically targeted what we call social outliers, and a lot of the victims of this technology are social outliers. It's people with a former drug history. It's women that are divorced and living alone. I mean, face it, a woman living alone is an easy target for any crime, whether it's electromagnetic crime or anything else. And they know that those people they're gonna lack the resources they're not gonna have a congressman in the family or, an FBI agent in the family or a CIA agent in the family that they can turn to, at least to verify to them what's going on, they're going to turn to their family who's also, lower middle class or upper middle class, that as soon as they confide in their family member that they're hearing voices and they feel like they're being followed, they're going to get the question that you just asked: why you? You're a nobody.
Right.
And that's asked of these victims all the time. And usually after that is, well, why would anybody want to spend? Do you realize the hundreds of thousands of dollars that it would cost to track you and follow you everywhere? And that's just also simply not true. Satellite surveillance is the most effective and efficient financial way to track someone. Our tax dollars launched those satellites, and you can look at, have you seen satellite trackers that you can get today if you want to watch your spouse? They're the size of a matchbox. You put it in a magnet box, you slap it on the bottom of the car, you log on to the site, and it's, $20 a month, and you can watch your spouse everywhere they go.
Or, yeah, it's definitely. Well, and that's the thing. MK Ultra, people seem to have forgotten, or it's a cognitive dissonance or whatever it is about that. But that project came out. They've spent all that money, all those resources, all those years doing that to people. Why would they suddenly go, well, I guess we got caught, so we're going to just stop now and not do anything? I mean, all of these things, if you go back to documents that were released in the mid-50s that talk about the different things they were looking for as far as substances to alter the mind and promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where someone would be discredited in public and those kinds of things, I mean, it all seems to fit that this is basically just a high-tech continuation, really, of the MK Ultra program in a lot of ways. I mean, does that seem like a fair statement?
Oh yeah, it is. It's exactly what it is. It's a continuation of MK Ultra. The research didn't stop with the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission. The only thing that stopped after those hearings was the freedom of information flow. The only thing that happened is they made the research a little blacker, a little darker, where it was harder to see. And even what we had from freedom of information regarding MK Ultra, most of the documents were shredded. What we had to go by were the financial documents. That's why, we knew which universities were taking part, which front companies were taking part, like the Human Ecology Fund, InQtel, both were venture capital firms that were kind of secretly funded by the CIA. Which, by the way, for those of you who are avid Facebook users, is also where the money came to start Facebook, which is a data mining program. That's worked very successfully because you don't have to watch people on Facebook. They volunteer the information.
They watch themselves for you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's exactly what this is. As technology progressed, you don't have to detain someone or pick someone up off the street and drug them and put them in a laboratory. Society now is the laboratory, now that we have remote directed energy capability.
Well, so we've gotten emails and letters and things, and people have said all manner of different things happen to them where they get just a sound will be shot into their head over and over and over and over. Some of them have said voices will come into their head over and over and over, that they have energy directed into their body to where their arm will just twitch uncontrollably. I mean, what kind of symptoms can people, I mean, if this was happening to someone, I guess, at first they might think they're going insane. What kind of symptoms do you hear people talk about when they send you or call you, send you letters?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll kind of break it down into a phased type of event for you. And typically what you see in the first phase is stalking. And most people, they're not very quick to report stalking because you're always never really sure. When you see the same car that's, behind you and in your neighborhood and at your work, and, your first thing, you look at it and you go, I wonder if I'm being stalked. And then the better part of your mind says, no, it's probably somebody who lives in my neighborhood that works in the same area, goes to the same Starbucks, and happens to be at the same place I'm having lunch. You kind of, the natural inclination is you're going to write that off rather than cry stalking. In most states, that's not illegal anyway, even to stalk you that way. In most states, you have to get a restraining order, you have to prove that there's been physical harm before you can get a restraining order. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good to report that at that point, too. Then the breaking and entering starts. Usually people notice the stalking first. Then they notice that they come home and their stuff has been gone through. Typically there's nothing stolen, but you will notice that maybe a cigarette's been left burning on your back patio. Your furniture's been slightly moved around. In extreme cases, I've had people come in, including the girl I worked with here, that would come in and see that, you know, there's the smell of wet paint and one wall's been painted a different color. Things like that. And typically, even with that, the police won't do anything about it if nothing's stolen. They'll come and take a report for criminal trespassing, but if it's not a burglary where there's a certain financial amount actually stolen, you get a report, and they'll tell you honestly that that report's not going to be acted on unless something's stolen. So the perpetrators are pretty careful to let you know they've been in your house, but not actually do anything that will necessitate a criminal investigation. After you notice the breaking and entering, the first thing that every one of these victims notices is tinnitus, ringing in the ears. And it's been well elucidated through a number of studies that chronic exposure to electromagnetic fields will cause ringing in the ears. And we see that in MRIs. People that are getting MRI scans of their brains or their knees or whatever damaged part is being looked at will often say that they can hear ringing in their ears, or even when they close their eyes, they'll see streaks of light or bursts of light with their eyes closed. And those are called magnetophosphines, and that's a well-known side effect of electromagnetic energy stimulating the optic nerves. Interestingly enough, we see the same thing in the victims of electromagnetic harassment. Most of them will complain a part of the sleep deprivation is that when they try to close their eyes and go to sleep at night, it looks like a fireworks show going off in their eyelids. And those are magnetophosphines and are pathognomonic of being bombarded with electromagnetic energy. And slowly the tinnitus the ringing in the ears will erode to hearing voices. Those voices aren't typically telling you that they're God or angels, although sometimes they do use that on victims, but they want you to know you're being watched, and they want you to run around telling people you're under surveillance. So typically the voices are describing your whereabouts in a room, what you're wearing, what you look like, what you're thinking about doing, what you've already done, along with usually derogatory comments about the way you're dressed or the way you look.
Wow.
And then the directed
And
energy
these people
attacks.
are complicit in doing this. I mean, this is not like a compartmentalization where they take a person who works at a government agency and puts them in a booth and says, here, record some stuff. I mean, this has got to be like some real-time stuff if they're able to say what you're wearing and what you're doing. I mean, these people are complicit in this.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Most of the time it is done live. Now, there are some victims that seem to be put on an electronic loop, and which is equally distressing because in that type of a loop system, basically you're kind of wired into the system, and what you're actually hearing are your own thoughts being played back to you. And a lot of victims won't pick up on that for a while, and they think it's voices being directed at them when they're actually hearing their own thoughts being returned back to them with a slight delay. So essentially they end up talking to themselves through this electromagnetic communication system. But most of them are being done in real time and not put on an automatic system. And then once the directed energy attacks start, then you're right, you do see involuntary body motion, arm jerks, knee jerks, leg jerks, sometimes a full body type of micro seizure, severe heartburn that starts up and, even with treatment won't go away until they stop bombarding the stomach with microwave energy. Severe headaches that start at the back of the skull where the occipital nerves are most shallow along the skull and are easy to hit. Genital attacks are very common, especially in women. They refer to it as electromagnetic rape, and usually that's meant to initially lightly stimulate the woman's vagina with a tingling sensation, usually meant to get them to masturbate, where obviously while perpetrators are watching. but over time becomes painful. But the whole time you're actually hearing the perpetrator's voice, letting you know that they're doing it.
Oh, gosh, that's disgusting. That is so sick. So the ultimate goal of this, I mean, it sounds to me like it's a They Live scenario. You remember that movie, the They Live movie from the 80s, where they have the basically an elite sect of society that's beaming out control waves, that's keeping everybody asleep. I mean, that's kind of what this sounds ultimately like. It sounds completely insane. It sounds like some diabolical, insane thing that crazy people would do, and yet what it's doing is actually making people crazy. But it's actually brilliant in that way. Wow.
Well,
I'm sorry.
There's no mistake with that, because the MK Ultra studies were started by some of the leading psychiatrists. So when people say, well, that what you're describing sounds like schizophrenia, well, it was designed to sound like schizophrenia. Ewan Cameron was the president of the Canadian Psychiatric Association and the American Psychiatric Association, and worked on a number of these projects, as well as Jose Delgado, who, by the way, is still alive.
I'm familiar with that guy.
Yeah, in Spain. In the 1980s, he actually made the comment that he no longer needed to chip anybody to control them, that it could be done through broadcasting. He had already kind of warned in the 80s that this was coming, that there was no longer a reason to put a chip in the brain to control people, that it could all be done through electromagnetics. And your comment about an elite group controlling everyone, well, his book was exactly that. He thought that people should be tipped at birth and have an elite group that would basically control the masses, and wrote that in a book called A Psycho-Civilized Society.
Yes, I've wanted to get a copy of it, but it's quite expensive.
Delgado's a real freak. But it also seems to bear a lot of similarity to the psychological tactic gaslighting, where they change the small devices it's based on a play where they dim the lighting and make the wife doubt that basically she's being messed with, that small elements are being manipulated to make them doubt their own sanity, right?
Well, and then some people do, and I've had victims contact me and actually took themselves to a psychiatrist and got themselves seen. And they said, you know what? I woke up one day, I was hearing voices. The media has basically kind of taught us that anyone hearing voices is automatically schizophrenic. So they said, you know what? I'm hearing voices. I must be schizophrenic. I guess I better go see a psychiatrist. And let me tell you something. Schizophrenics don't think that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've worked in a mental facility before. I mean, schizophrenia, that usually comes on in, your late teens and early 20s. I mean, that's not something that people suddenly usually have when they're, 50 or something. They just wake up one day schizophrenic. I mean, that's not typically what happens with that disease. But also just the statistics on schizophrenia, which I don't have handy with me, but I know I've looked at them before, and it has gone way, way up. And there's a lot of money being put out into research programs all over the country on schizophrenia and various aspects. And I just have to wonder if that's part of this concerted effort. I mean,
I think in a lot of cases, I think you're right. I think it probably is. People that may have not looked around to see what other things could put voices in their head. I've been asked a number of times, well, how do you discriminate between who's contacting you and really is a victim and who's schizophrenic? And, somebody who's truly schizophrenic in an interview, you can pretty much bear that out pretty quickly, just in their mannerisms. If they're you're right, if they're the right age group, typically schizophrenia hits males from 18 to 25. Women can be a little bit later, 18 to 30. Paranoid schizophrenia, they'll extend the years of onset a couple of years each way. But when you boil it right down, those people who are truly schizophrenic and you interview the families, they'll tell you that person was kind of never really right, even as a child. And what we're talking about with these victims are people who were, most of them successful, most of them educated, most of them, mentally correct, raising a family, having a decent life, and then can pinpoint the day they noticed stalking and the day they started hearing voices. And, schizophrenia just doesn't come on like with this shooter acutely overnight. And The other thing is that some of the victims that have been mandatoried into psych evals and have gotten either diagnosed with schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, or more often delusional disorder, and have been placed on meds. Typically with schizophrenia meds, they get better. When they're on meds, a lot of times the symptoms go away, especially with a combination of meds and cognitive behavior therapy. With these victims, you can put them on the med you want. They're still going to hear voices, and they're still going to be attacked.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just going to switch topics over to the shooter because I know how I felt when because I had not reported on it at all until I read that report that that was filed with the Rhode Island police, where he said that he was hearing voices through the walls and the ceiling and the floor, that he had to change hotel rooms 3 times, that they were pulsing him with some kind of microwave weapon. He wasn't, it sounded like, sure what to call it, and that he was afraid they were going to really hurt him, and that he had changed hotels 3 times to try and get away from this. And even in that report, if you look at the physical document that's been scanned in, the officer, whoever put this report up, has taken a Sharpie to the last line of what you can see, but it says showing signs of some sort of mental deficiency. I mean, that's obviously where the officer went with it after speaking to him. But then we know more about the timeline. We know that Aaron Alexis then, at some point, that was 7th, around the 18th, he was spotted at the monastery. He was trying to get them to let him spend the night, but they said only monks can spend the night. They asked him, what's wrong? Why can't you just go to your hotel or go home? And he had said that he was hearing noises and voices, and they wouldn't stop, and he didn't know what to do. But even then, they said he was very polite, very, very friendly about it, and he was speaking to them in Thai. He was being, just like a normal person, but he was saying, this is what's happening to me. And then we know that, I believe it was the 23rd, he showed up at the VA asking for something for insomnia, saying it was work-related, and was back at the VA emergency room 5 days later. He had run out, and that's when they put him on trazodone. And a lot of people have said this is obviously a clear-cut case of just another person who they put on antidepressants, who's already having mental problems. They put him on antidepressants, and he freaked out and shot a place up. But obviously there's a whole pattern here way before that, because the trazodone wasn't given to him until the 28th reportedly. And, of course, the shooting happened on the 16th. But weeks before that, he was complaining about this to anyone, it sounds like, who would listen, basically. Hey, this is happening to me, and he didn't seem to know what to do. And it seems like by the 23rd, he knew, I better not say anything to law enforcement because they're probably going to, or the VA medical officials, because they're probably going to put me in a padded room. But, I mean, when you heard that, did your stomach, not drop from that?
Well, not only that, after hearing that story and then what he etched on the side of his shotgun,
yes.
This is my ELF weapon, tells me
and better off this way.
Yeah, I think he probably, especially he had a clearance, and he was one of these guys who came in, and when you were turning over your computers or changing software, he would come in and do it. I'm sure he had a little bit of knowledge about what he was being attacked with. My gut feeling is that, and I know the major media is going to try to make this sound like the voices told him to go run amok and do a shooting. Based on what he etched on that shotgun, I think the voices probably did convince him that it was coming from the Navy, which he had been a part of. And I think the reason he etched that on his shotgun was more going in there as a vengeful shooting against where he perceived the technology that was attacking him coming from, more so than he was technically controlled to go do the shooting. Now, was he trying to be driven crazy so he would go shoot something up? Sure, looks like it, especially since everybody in the major media immediately jumped on the AR-15 bandwagon before they even knew what guns he had.
Exactly.
But I think he kind of actually had a conscious plan going to the Navy Yard. I think he perceived that as the source of his problem.
Well, and it definitely
strikes me as very plausible.
Yeah, that really does sound like, that does sound very plausible. And at that point, better off this way. When I think about that, I wonder, were they saying you'll be better off this way if you just go do something? Or, just how how long do you think it takes? I mean, when you think of a story like this, you have to wonder to yourself, how long would it take the average person to be driven to an act like that after weeks, enduring weeks and weeks of what obviously was horrible harassment? I mean, the thing is anyone can say the guy was crazy and he was making this up, but what he's describing mirrors thousands of other reports, literally, to a T. So.
Well, and I think the better off this way, what he was referring to is he probably knew once he was targeted this way that he was going to be continued to be targeted this way. And it was basically what was on that shotgun meant, you want to shoot me up with elf-wave weapons? This is my elf-wave weapon coming right back at you. And it's better off this way than me just languish someplace letting you attack me for the rest of my life. So I think what he etched on that shotgun
they let him know that. I mean,
exactly, it was etched in a perfectly conscious fashion.
Well, and then you think about how, you know, when Sandy Hook happened, when the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting happened at the end of last year, I mean, immediately, you know, the government had a coalition to work on gun control, even though the government can't make a noodle salad, you know, in a week, and yet automatically there's a coalition, and they're, you know, Joe Biden's heading it up, and they're going to have new gun laws, and immediately the president's got, you know, 23 executive orders, and most of them are mental health related, and have to do with taking away people's rights based on things like that, and doctors becoming snitches, and I mean the whole deal. And then you have this. We had that whole Syria thing going on in the media. I mean, that was just, it really blew up in our government's face with that. And then all of a sudden this happened, and the focus is completely shifted. No one's talking about Syria anymore. No one's talking about all the stuff that just happened, and the fact that we may or may not have averted World War III, as many people were discussing. And then this happens, and it's suddenly all over the media, and it's everywhere, and they're talking about AR-15s. I think CNN even said AR-15 shotgun, which doesn't even exist. And I mean, just, it's everywhere. And then the mental health stuff starts coming out, how we need more screenings and we need all this. But then when this ELF stuff started really coming out, and people started saying, hey, wait a minute, I know, you know, it became a mainstream. I mean, at this point, it was in the Washington Times and the Washington Post, and they were talking about how, you know, the government has had programs, and the Manchurian candidates and weather modification became front page news in a mainstream media outlet, things that if you and I had discussed them even a few months ago, I mean, they would say, you guys are crazy. Now they're just talking about it like, oh, yeah, they totally have that. It's a normal whatever. And then suddenly the story is just gone. They're not talking about the Navy Yard shooting anymore. It's just, it's not even a thing now. They're talking about, I don't even know what they're talking about now, but it disappeared after that very quickly. And the only time it's even come back, really, that I can tell is when Obama did his crying, tearful, like, we have to have more transformation in America gun control stuff. But other than that, I mean, that story, after a lot of these things started coming out in the alternative media, mostly all the alternative media, but it was a few mainstream media outlets. But yeah, it seemed like the story got taken out of the media after that. So,
well, that's like, you hit the nail on the head. The government operates on diversion, and you know, and they know that the majority of the American public is going to listen to NPR or watch CNN, and even not watch it very much, but watch it briefly. And you're right. I mean, when the NSA story broke from Snowden's documents, and the IRS, you know, having some overreach, you know, broke, they needed a diversion. So all of a sudden, you know, the CIA had some rebels kill a bunch of civilians with some gas, and which I truly believe that's what happened. And boots on the ground, there are reporters that even said that it wasn't Assad, that it was the rebels, and we know the rebels are CIA backed. So it wouldn't make sense. Assad, you know, why, if Assad's going to use gas, he's going to gas the rebels, not a bunch of women and children.
Well, exactly. He had UN inspectors there earlier in that week. There's no reason that he would turn around and then go, oh, change my mind, I'm going to just, you know, that makes no sense. Yeah, that whole story made zero sense.
Yeah,
anyone paying attention for longer than... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
But it worked as a great diversion to get the heat off of the NSA.
It definitely did.
Because all of a sudden, we're gonna send missiles into Syria, and it's going to be World War III, which it would be World War III, because one of two of Russia's oil ports are in Syria. They're not going to let that happen. And then on top of that, I mean, they were hoping they were going to milk the Syria thing out a little while longer, but I guess Putin must have actually taken Obama seriously too, so he made sure to step in and kind of make Obama look like a fool. So then all of a sudden they needed diversion to get off of Syria because Obama was looking like an idiot and we had nobody else backing him up. So all of a sudden you need another diversion. Well, we still haven't got the gun control that we want to get, so let's have another shooting. So here you...
And they kind of juggle those agenda topics. And leading up to the Adam Lanza Sandy Hook stuff, there was definitely a push. There were bills introduced in Congress, the likes of Feinstein and Chucky Schumer and such, saying we need more mental health specifically for veterans. And we need to talk about disarming veterans who are PTSD or otherwise basically damaged goods. Perhaps a real political movement to disarm veterans or just discredit them in general. Do we see that playing out at all with the Navy Yard shooter? Of course, he was a contractor, but we've seen how important Edward Snowden as a contractor can be in terms of the dialogue over surveillance. Maybe you can flesh out that issue.
Well, certainly we had a veteran here in Houston, Texas, that actually his psychologist started asking the gun questions that the government has recommended that we as physicians ask. And he was honest and said, yeah, I own weapons, and she reported him. Reported him to the local authorities as having severe PTSD and owning weapons, and they came and they confiscated his weapons.
Oh, my God.
In Texas, of all places, if you could imagine. So that's certainly going to be a big problem here. You take a guy, and it's okay to go over to Afghanistan and be shot at for 6 months to a year. But when you come back, we're going to claim you've got PTSD, and you're not going to be allowed to have a weapon to defend your family. Makes not a lot of sense. And anybody that goes through, the theater of war, to some extent is going to come back with, probably what some of the psychiatrists overdiagnose with PTSD. I don't know under therapy if it's necessarily a reason to confiscate their guns. And while, the media can focus on one or two events where maybe a veteran has gone awry with a gun and it's blamed on PTSD, that's still not happening very commonly. It's kind of like the NSA using terrorism as an excuse to read all our emails and text and, in our phone calls. The likelihood of you being killed here or abroad in a terrorist bombing is, was it 1 in 179,000? The likelihood you're going to be killed.
It's pretty absurd.
Yeah. The likelihood you're going to be killed in a car wreck on the way to work is 1 in 300. So, I think cars are actually having a much more successful jihad against us than the terrorist. So, but the American public buys that hook, line, and sinker, and they're buying the whole story now, like you said, with the subcontractors and the contractors. First they said, oh, it's a gun control issue. Then they kind of started leaning towards a mental health issue. We got to do, they've let everybody out of the hospitals. We've got to incarcerate the mentally ill again. And now they're kind of leaning on the companies that do the background checks. Well, this guy had a secret clearance. He had a background check. I guarantee you he did. To get a CAC card, you don't just fill out a document and here's a couple of numbers, call my friends who are going to vouch for me. That's not the way it works. They come out, they talk to your family, they talk to your neighbors, they talk to former employers. It's a very detailed thing, even in the hands of a company that may be inept, because they still have to document that they talk to these people. So, I don't think they're going to point to a failure. I think there's too many subcontractors and non-government employees being given clearances. There's more people today in the private sector with top secret clearances than there ever have been, which may explain why this technology has ramped up and is being exponentially used, because there's a lot of people that aren't directly on the government payroll that can access these type of weapons probably. But as far as the vetting of some of these people, I think the vetting is fairly standard, and I think they're grasping at straws to call it a poor vetting, that somehow or another this guy slipped through. And they tried to say that with Snowden too, and I think Snowden just actually, kind of came across some morality and some ethics and chose to do the right thing. You know, and sometimes, like I found in writing this book, trust me, I've suffered a lot of repercussions from that. But sometimes the right road's the hard road. Most of the time, the right road's the hard road.
That's very, very true.
Let me go back to the gang stalking, and I don't mind admitting that I've been kind of a skeptic or hard to deal with this, and that's coming from someone in the alternative media working with, you know, conspiratorial issues. And over the years, over many years, I've been contacted by people, you know, here and there claiming to be victims, and they send their whole story. And you talked about how the media won't cover it. You know, having been there, an issue with it is that I have yet to be presented with a digestible case example that can be verified in some way and reported on it. It's frequently people who are, you know, explaining the ways that they're being assaulted, but not in ways that can really be fleshed out. There's no video evidence. You know, you talked about collecting audio evidence, but I've not seen that from people. And don't get me wrong, obviously I sympathize with these people. I don't even disbelieve them, but it's hard to know where to enter into this. So I'm looking at exposing the system, because obviously it seems to be very systematic. There are way too many complaints of this for it to be, you know, made up pranks. It's way too many cases. Frankly, for schizophrenics, you know, some of them might be, but there does seem to be a case here. How do we begin to expose and prove this, particularly document it? Can we get people with camera recorders? Because their privacy's been invaded already. They're inside their head. You know, do you have victims who are willing to go through having this documented on cameras, number one? Number two, you outline the technology, and obviously they can piggyback off of existing cell towers, existing satellites, existing EMF technologies, etc. But at what point can we measure this? You know, certain homes that we know are being targeted. Is there a way of measuring that there's unusual levels of electromagnetic activity, or etc.? Related technologies, you know, is there proof of funding for the manpower of the people who are physically going to these homes and doing levels of harassment? These kind of questions.
Well, yeah, there actually are ways to do that, but that is kind of the fly in the ointment. And that's
I mean, these
why
are probably your frequently asked questions, but, you know, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at.
We would love to be able to expose this. We would really love to be able to do it, even if that makes us targets, I guess. But I really want to help these people. When they write, I am so sympathetic and emotionally involved when I read these stories. I can't even imagine how horrible it must be for them. Like, it really hurts sometimes to read it, but I want to help them as much as I possibly can.
Well, for one, you know, most of these people don't have the finances to fund the what you would need to do to get adequate proof, if there is such a thing. Because, I mean, we have had people who have spent the money to have RF spectrographic analysis in their house done for days at a time by professional radio frequency people, and they have found excess electromagnetic energy in the house. But when you try to present that as part of your case, you know, they're going to say, well, you know, you're near a power line, or it's probably TV transmissions or radio transmissions, or, you know, it's Wi-Fi, it's satellite TV. And I mean, it's, even once you have that evidence, you have no place to go with it. And as far as the direct proof, you can, I mean, most of these victims do have pretty adequate proof of their stalking. They've got plate numbers, you know, as I did with this girl. It was, once we had people actually watching her, and I actually assisted in watching her. I mean, it was the same. This wasn't, well, let's put it this way, this wasn't stalking from afar. This was direct harassment. These were the people watching her, driving by our car, shooting the finger at us, leaving trash on the car, wiping stuff on the handles, following the people doing the counter surveillance back to their driveways. I mean, it was very obvious that they were pissed off of it.
Really sick people, just really sick people that would ever do something like that. Just sick.
Well, I mean, from a practical level, if we're dealing with, you know, say chapters of former FBI turned private investigator people, how can we begin to pinpoint these people? Because it's obviously going on a national scale, if not global.
Well, if we can get one of the groups busted, the whole house of cards will actually probably fall, because all of these people seem to be working in coordination. Because even when we have victims that California, like in particular, is one of the states that's being hit the hardest. I'd say most of the victims right now are coming out of California. And they'll try to move. They'll move to New Mexico or to Texas or to New York or, to the Midwest. And first off, they'll notice the electronic harassment actually follows them immediately because that's, being done via satellite. But there's a slight delay of a week or two, but then the gang stalking starts back up. And it's very obvious that these people are being handed off to another group in the local area. So, but there, like I said, there is a delay. Oftentimes these victims will go, man, I moved to, Dallas, Texas, and now I'm from California, and now I'm free. I haven't noticed anyone following me for a week. And then a couple of weeks later, they'll notice the stalking start back up. Especially if it's early on in their targeting, because the way this works, the stalking is usually, in most cases, an initial phase. The stalking may last several months, and then the stalking kind of tapers off, and then you're left with just hearing voices and being attacked with directed energy. And that's one of the reasons, at least my theory, and Dr. Robert Duncan, who I work with pretty closely, who worked on some of the projects involved with this type of technology, think that not only does the stalking, not only is it a form of COINTELPRO psychological warfare on these victims, but it's also being done to GPS them by vicinity in order to get some form of a biometric identity on them, whether that's cataloging their EEG, getting facial recognition, body recognition. We think that the way the technology actually works is by basically getting a model of their EEG remotely through remote neural monitoring, because all the rest of this seems to be based on accessing the central nervous system and manipulating the brain. And that would make sense. You can either chip somebody to track them, or you can track them by vicinity with a stalker.
See, and they're working on EEG monitor things that can be hooked into iPhones and stuff now. I mean, that's something that I saw. This is so. What I guess my question is then, what can people do? Like, if somebody thinks this is happening to them, because obviously, I mean, I've read. I think maybe you're even part of this group, the covert harassment and surveillance group. But I've read
part
their,
of their medical committee. Yeah.
Yeah, I've read their advice, and I've also listened to other people interview with this, including former Army intelligence veteran Julian McKinney, who's written about this, and she claims that many doctors, no offense doctor, but many doctors are in on this actually, and so because they're part of this, it's a vast research, and so you got people going into doctors saying, I have this problem. They're being put on all kinds of medications, which obviously don't help them because it's not solving what's really going on. And I guess there's these people, so many people are afraid and they don't know what to do when this happens, and it seems like it's a really hard question to answer.
Well, the advice I usually give to victims is, for one, don't try to convince the unconvincible. And typically it's going to be your family members that have you committed. And that reasoning is, we've all had our younger years where we've done a few crazy things or said a few crazy things, and it's your family members that are going to remember that. And when you start voicing these complaints, then they're kind of like with the shooter. It's real easy to dig through somebody's past and point at a few instances where they did something kind of wild and crazy and go, see, this was a long history of mental illness. If I wanted to victimize you that way, I guarantee you I could look through your teenage years, your college years, find a couple of instances that I could form a story about something you've done today.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we all have that.
Well, and that's exactly what they did with the shooter. If you looked at some of the news stories, they said a long history of mental disorders, including insomnia, which is the press's way of saying we have no clue about this guy's medical background. We know we have insomnia. So I usually tell the victims, deal with focus groups, Freedom from Covert Harassment, mindjustice.org, raven1.com. ISA Act is one that I'm involved with right now, which is mostly professionals from different multidisciplinary areas that are kind of looking at ways to expose this and to study it scientifically. And that stands for the International Center Against Covert Technologies, ISA Act, ICAACT. focus on talking to people that already are experiencing this or know about this. Don't try to convince the unconvincible. Those are the people that are going to get you.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, I mean, obviously there's the sense that this is pervasive. There seems to be an obvious attempt to give people the impression this is futile. There's nothing you could do. You're going to basically be broken down by this and become a victim. Is it important for people to keep the mindset that they don't have to be a victim? Are there proactive things, even though they may not be able to directly escape the harassment, to realize I'm not crazy, I am being targeted, so I don't need to feel like I've done something wrong, like something's deficient in me? I mean, do they back off of people who can be strong enough to kind of not be broken by this?
Yeah, somewhat. And I know of a lot of people that are in this fight that have kind of became more noteworthy. They tend to back off of a little bit. And a lot of times they'll back off people just due to a shortage of manpower. I know the group here, several other victims that have identified the same group here have said that it was really bad for a couple of years and then it kind of backed off. And I think that largely is because of manpower. I mean, this group I know especially has about 10 employees, so they can't stalk a bunch of people all at once. So as they move from one victim to another, or are hired to move from one victim to another, then they have to kind of back off one of the other ones for a little while. And the other thing I tell these victims is, which I wish that when by time victims contact me, they would contact me when the stalking starts, because that's when you actually have a chance to do something about this. A lot of the states have changed their stalking laws. Texas is included. If you notice the same person following you more than twice, you can get a police report and get a restraining order against that person.
Wouldn't harassment be related but separate as well?
It's harder for them to prove. If I mean, these are the kinds of things that go into your head, and so I mean, I've read that if they put a microphone next to you, they're not going to pick that up because it's just only aimed at one person. Oh,
yeah,
so
and that's actually that was actually in the addendum to the bioeffects of non-lethal weapons from the Army, and they went on to say that you could even put a microphone in the ear canal and it couldn't be picked up. That they describe how it works, which is true. It's through thermoelastic expansion in the auditory system that creates a wave that's thermal wave, which is then picked up by the electrical system of the brain that takes that back to what you actually hear. And they go on to tell you its value in putting voices in the heads of enemy combatants, or using it in a hostage situation where you can communicate with the hostages without the hostage taker hearing.
Yeah,
so
they always have
research
some
is out
legitimate
there.
way to, they always legitimize it somehow. I read that and I thought that was ridiculous. But, so we've been talking to you. We've taken up a lot of your time, and I really appreciate you talking to us. And he's written the book, A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America. And I read on Amazon that you're working on a second book detailing safeguards. Is that still in the works?
Yeah, actually that's just about done. That book is called Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control, and it's actually in transcription now, and hopefully will be released at the beginning of the year. And there's actually a movie being done on A New Breed that's in pre-production. For anyone interested in that, the website is www.newbreedmovie, which not a documentary, but a drama based on a true story. So that way, the best way to educate the non-victimized public, which is who needs to be educated on this, is to have a good movie. So.
Definitely. I will definitely be checking that out. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we can talk again for sure. So
thanks for having me on. I had a really good time with you guys.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. You have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right, and I think we've got a caller who's been holding on the line, so we'll go to him right now and see if they have any comments. Thanks for holding. It hasn't really been a call-in show, but we're interested in what you think. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Hi, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Scott Brown. I am a targeted individual. I currently live in Austin, Texas, and this has been going on for about 4 years now. I get everything from remote neural monitoring to skin sensations to sexual-oriented skin sensations. My thoughts constantly tossed back to me, and it's I was hoping to talk to Dr. John Hall as well, but I mean that unfortunately couldn't happen. I've actually talked
sorry,
to him
we had to
before.
let him go because we had already kept him way over time. I apologize.
Yeah, it happens. It's not a major issue, but I would like to thank y'all for all the information that I got here late, but I mean I wanted to call in and just let y'all know that I didn't realize that y'all's show was in Austin. I currently just moved here to see if it would, but they follow me 300 miles from Paris, Texas to here, so
Wow.
just wanted
Did you
to.
experience physical stalking as well as mental and electronic stalking, or was it just one kind or the other?
It's all of it. I actually also get something called Manchurian Candidate, where I actually get it started like 3 years ago. I got this line in my right eye and not the left one. Like it attaches from the inside of my nose kind of to my pupil. Underneath the colors, I can actually see the veins that go underneath my colors, and at times when I go to close my eyes, I can see them like they're like in their own house, in their room, and they're like moving a camera or something like a box or something, because I've seen them flip it upside down, and it actually shows me colors, details of their walls, like dust. This also happened whenever my eyes were completely open as well, and that's never happened before in all my life. So.
Wow. How have you been able to cope? You said this is going on for 4 years?
Yes. Just strong will. I mean, it's better for me to push forward instead of go backwards, and actually try to inform people about what's going on instead of cowering down and not allowing myself to say who I am and being worried about it, because if my
Well, that's
privacy's already been
absolutely what I
taken.
think would be most important, because these are high-tech bullies, but they're bullies nonetheless. And as soon as you cower to a bully, you become their victim. And strong will would definitely at least send them a message back.
Well, I'm gonna go to I can't go anymore, and try to at least put it out there that yes, this goes on, and this happened to me. It started to me in a town of about 30,000 people or so, all the way to here. And I lived in Mississippi. It followed me all the way to Mississippi and all the way back, and 4 years worth of my life having to deal with this same issue. So,
Well, let me ask you this question, because I read about this stuff, and it's horrible, and it's frustrating too to try to prove it, to try to put yourself in that mindset of what would you do if you're in something you don't understand how to get out of, you maybe don't understand how to relate to other people, you try to explain it, maybe they do think you're crazy, or maybe they just don't know what you're talking about. Dr. John mentioned that your best chance to catch them is regarding the physical stalking. Were you able to document anything or recruit any friends to your aid in trying to physically collect evidence of people physically stalking you?
Not at the current time, but I did tonight actually. A black car had been following me two-door, and when I pulled up at the place that I'm staying at, there was actually the same type of car like 2 houses down. So, I mean, but it was dark, so I didn't actually get a chance to get the license plate.
But, I mean, you would become... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I know that it's going on. I know for a fact that it is. I don't do any drugs. I don't drink, And so I know I'm aware of my surroundings at all times. And,
you would become hyper aware, I would think, over time of your surroundings if this kind of thing is happening, because you would start to recognize everything around you.
You have to.
Probably.
You have to. If you don't, then that's just something else for them to use against me, I guess.
Have you had a specific sense that you're alone and don't have someone to turn to on this? Because the reason I ask is my feeling, trying to put myself in what I do, is that if I felt I couldn't explain this to other people, I would maybe come up with a plausible explanation like, hey, friend, hey, neighbor, obviously I don't want to explain all this to you because it's complicated. I think an ex-girlfriend might be stalking me. Have you noticed anything weird, weird cars coming by? I think somebody was trying to break into my, that kind of thing. See if you can learn things from, friends or neighbors you might have or something. That's just a suggestion. I don't know if that's helpful, but.
No, not really, because the way that I look at it, there's radio shows and things where people that are more open and susceptible to actual information that's already existing besides somebody I live next door to, So
gotcha.
it's better for
Aaron
me
doesn't
personally.
know this, but I just read this right before we came on air, but that neighbors oftentimes, if they can be coerced into going along with this, will actually help target people. So, it's almost like, it is almost like a forced paranoia. You cannot trust anybody, really, in this kind of situation right around you immediately, because you never know who, what they might be, what their ultimate agenda might be, or if they have an agenda or not. It's really devious plan. Well,
Yes,
so you're hanging in there.
Yeah, and but I've also joined groups, OSI, organized. It's a place for organized stalking and like OSI informers, and call in pretty much almost every night just to talk with other people that are going through the same thing and compare what's going on. And it helps to know that because for years I thought that this is only happening to me, and then met
That must have been really
50
hard.
people in a week. Yeah, it was, but I got through it, and I'm still trucking strong, so I'm not hiding from anyone.
Well, thank you so much for calling in. We really, really appreciate you sharing that with us. I know that's probably tough to do on the radio, but really appreciate you calling in and sharing that, because that would give hope to other people. I know we've had people write us who are at various stages of this, and some of them don't know what to do. And I've been doing a lot of research on it, obviously, but I don't know necessarily what to tell them either, and I don't want to give people bad information or tell them the wrong thing. I want to help people if I can. So
I would still say, though, in the realm of activism, when you confront politicians or if you have police encounters, we've encouraged people to document those experiences, put them on YouTube and stuff, to show what's going on, to show how officials lie when you confront them. That's on the political side. And I understand this has got to be very difficult to deal with. So, if this doesn't pertain to you, I'm sorry, but if you can, I would say try to use cameras and other documentation. If a lot of people, if dozens and hundreds show the patterns, like, that weird anomalies keep happening, and it happens like this, and the same kind of weird card, this is going to help expose it on a mass pattern. I don't know how easily we could expose your particular case, but obviously this is going on a bigger scale, and I think support groups are very important, and I think I would just encourage those people to also band together and pull evidence together and start documenting so the rest of the public can relate to what's going on and see through your eyes the kind of experiences you're being put through.
Yes, that's something I'm looking to progress into, but I don't want to get something cheap and not being able to, pick it up and, have the mobility to go the ways that I travel and stuff. So, but yes, I'm definitely trying to get to that point. I'm on a very limited type of thing, but I'm trying to get the word out there and not ask for the help in a financial manner. I'd rather be able to progress it on my own. That way I know exactly what's going on, so I can, just help other people that are worried about, being said that they're crazy or whatever, whatever it is.
Well, I just
I'd
have
rather
one more.
Step out of the line.
Yeah, I know you probably have to go too, and I just have one more question, if you don't mind.
No
Dr. John had said that he thought that this was part of a global, like a concentrated effort to basically cull the population under a master control program, and that this was part of a long-term research program, basically continuing the MK Ultra. Have you ever seen the movie They Live? That John Carpenter movie?
Sure.
Well, basically that's a movie where they have this group of elites and they're beaming out a signal that's keeping everybody kind of under a control program so that they just go about their day and obey and consume and work, and they don't really ask questions or do any, they don't question the government. They just do what they're told. And he seemed to think that this was part of a larger global program, and that's the conclusion really that I think I've come to too. And I just wondered if you wanted to maybe weigh in on what you thought the ultimate goal of this was.
The basis of it, yes, probably just to control people and to let them, you do this, or we'll just repeat something to you a million times to see if you'll follow that line that we're drawing, or curve it.
Can you give an example of the kind of things that are said, or what that experience is like?
For me, it's every time a siren is, there's a lot of sirens around here. Oh, he called the cops, or which I've never actually done, or like a lot of like slang talking, like just, I don't even speak in any demeanor like that, but it's a lot of like me having to dumb down who I am to like for them to get their point across. That it could have been anything. It could have been the way my hair blew in the wind one day for them to target me like this, but all in the same, it's happening. And they say a lot of like, I'm going to shoot you in the face, or I'm going to kick in your door, and stuff like that, all the threatening type things. And I'm like, well, go ahead. Let's see that.
Bring it on.
I'm not gonna hide from anyone, and I'm not, gonna change who I am just because somebody wants to try to scare me. I'm not gonna be controlled by any person.
And I think what you just said and what you said at the beginning of the phone call remains one of the most important points, because in the spiritual realm, you'll find in the Bible and just religions all over, demons will try to interfere with you. They'll try to harass you, try to beat down the willpower of who you are. But if you rebuke that and say, no, I'm not going to be intimidated, you're not going to mess with me. I mean, holding on to that strength inside yourself, I just would have to imagine is one of the keys for anyone who might be suffering from this, and trying to relate to the public to help them understand what's going on. And that's not an issue of, something's wrong inside your head. It's that something's being done to you,
Yes, I actually, to get it out to society, I actually had my own shirt made where it says Google electronic harassment, and I'll walk around in it,
awesome.
Random places.
That is awesome.
I plan on getting my name on the back and all that type of stuff later, but it's something to get it out there for regular people.
That is a really good idea. That is a great idea. Thank you so much for calling. That's very brave, and I think that is great advice that will definitely help anybody who's listening that's suffering from this. And we're going to put this in archive, so all the information that Dr. John had from the first hour, you'll be able to access, and it'll also be up on our website at truthstreammedia.com. But thank you so much for calling.
Thank you very much for hosting this.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, have a good evening.
You
Appreciate
too.
hearing from you. Stay strong.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, that was a caller, and we didn't even really open it up to calls, but we get these reports all the time, and yeah.
I mean, this is a really pervasive issue. I mean, that's the thing. What is so upsetting to me about this is I'm a very empathetic person by nature. I care about people, and it very much upsets me to empathize with this. I can see how this would affect somebody on so many levels, how this would take over your life. I can see how it would drive somebody to do the most insane things. I have read some of what Delgado wrote. That guy was insane. He was a disgusting human being that did horrible things in experiments. And that's what we're up against with these people. And there are people that say, no, this is illegal. They would never do that because it's totally illegal. Yeah, it is totally illegal, but so is MK Ultra. So were all of the medical experiments that they did on people during the Manhattan Project, where they injected people with plutonium to see what would happen to them. I mean, our government has been involved in some sick stuff, okay? So illegal doesn't matter to these people. The people that are doing this don't give a flip about what's legal and what's not legal. And all you have to do to know about that is go look on there's a lot of websites that will have lists of the human medical experimentation that our government has been involved in dating back to the 1800s. So it's on record, okay, that these things have happened. I mean, I've read stories where they've put Navy ships out of the harbor in San Diego and gone up the coast and just sprayed viruses out on small coastal California towns just to see how far the virus would travel. I mean, I've read about how they've injected people with malaria back in the day just to see what would happen. One government scientist injected a 12-month-old with gosh, was it herpes or something? I think it was herpes. I mean,
everything.
It is disgusting. It is disgusting, the things that our government does. They do not care if it's legal. So that is out the window. Secondly, what's really upsetting is that this is not something that we can just tell people, go get a recorder and stick it up to your head and put it up on YouTube. I mean, we can't, it won't work. The way this works is it sends frequency waves. Everything is frequency. We are all energy. Earth is energy. Everything vibrates at a certain frequency, and so do we. And this targets those frequencies and shoots sound into your head. So imagine that if you can. It's not something I think most people can even conceive of because it's just so fantastical, and yet they've been perfecting these kinds of weapons since World War II. So it's been decades. I'm sure they've got even crazier stuff than what's in the declassified documents that they let us see, because we're the plebs. So what we actually get access to and what's actually going on, two vastly different things. I'm sure we have no clue what some of this stuff really is, what it's capable of, or how it works. But we do know that you can put microphones up to a person that's experiencing this and you will get nothing. So it's very hard for people to find a way to prove it or debunk it at that level once it's to the level where it's inside someone's head.
Well, I understand that, but I was suggesting people try to document the physical harassment as a base to getting there. But the other side of it is look at history, and yeah, okay, there is no restraint on the evil intent of the organized criminals who wedge themselves inside this government. No organized criminal unit is bigger than those that are embedded inside, particularly the clandestine units of the United States government. Yes, go read about the human medical experimentation, the history of all that sick stuff. They've tried everything conceivable.
I mean, this is on record, people. It's not a joke.
At the same time, you know, look at just a minor assumption. They talk about this being COINTELPRO on steroids. Look at what actually happened with COINTELPRO in the 60s and 70s. First, you had groups complaining about it, groups trying to raise awareness about it, you know, fight back against it. None of that immediately stopped what was going on, but it did give the basis for people to do investigations, and eventually they were pressured to declassify enough that now it's an issue, people can analyze it, talk about it. Yeah, that doesn't give a lot of comfort for the victims, but we've got to, at some point, bring people up to speed to acknowledge what's really going on so we can address how to fight it. There's the Gandhi quote, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then they win.
Then you win.
Then you win. Oh, yeah, that's kind of the key in verse, huh? Because even though this stuff seems fantastical and high-tech, and the biggest frustration with this entire gang stalking is that when you get an account of it, it seems unprovable, and there's almost the perception that, like, well, I couldn't prove that the stalking's going on because the physical stalking always happens when you're not there, or they move subtle things, or it wouldn't be under harassment laws, or, you know, it's taking place electronically and that's too expensive to prove. These are still just human people, and if this is happening obviously on a wide enough scale and enough people start to demonstrate what's going on, it's going to crack. We're going to find the proof. There's probably funding somewhere that links to these private units that are working on the government behalf.
There's got to be something. I mean,
yeah, you don't give up. These are humans, and we can beat them, and you've got to move to expose them. And it's great that they have support units. I really think they need to start thinking about documenting what they can to show that this is patterns and not just
I mean, eventually, the problem is there's just so much cognitive dissonance going around in our society as it is. And you and I fight this in our job all the time, just trying to get people to look at statistics, just trying to get them to look at white papers or data and say, look at this is what's happening. And even when you have the paper in your hand, the problem is that there are so many people out there who just trust the loving government, and they just cannot conceive of the level of diabolical evil that we're talking about here. You and I can conceive of it, but there are so many people that just cannot even wrap their mind around it to make it possible.
Experiencing this, you can't just go next door and say, here, A, B, C, D, this is happening.
Exactly. So we can just get more people to talk out and talk out and talk out and talk out. I mean, eventually, if you're just one person singing a song and then 5 people join you, then you're a group. Well, if 10 people join you, you become a chorus. If we can just get more and more people to talk about this, because no one ultimately is going to just buy that suddenly a huge section of the population became schizophrenic. No one is just going to suddenly believe that. Right. So this, I mean, and like Dr. John said earlier, I mean, schizophrenia has an onset time. It's not like you just wake up one day in your 50s and you're schizophrenic. That is not how schizophrenia works. But the problem is that we have people sitting on their couch and they believe what they're told on TV, and they probably read the news by skimming headlines only, and they don't really dig into things. And so, and we've been programmed by television, which is one of the biggest mind control weapons out there, that if you hear voices, you're a crazy person.
Oh, sure. And most of the population you'll probably never get through to, but people who are already paying attention and currently in the process of waking up to alternative information, to the alternative news, researching for themselves, I personally still find this is hard to approach because it's not like a news story like so-and-so said this on this date at this event.
And blah, blah, blah.
That stuff is documented. So at least you have, whether you believe it or not, at least you have a basis for what they're talking about. This is based on individuals' perceptions, and we've got to show how it's a cataloged experience and that similar things document, and that's why I say start with the physical. You got to document what you can. But as you mentioned, don't trust the authorities. If you're having these symptoms, don't call the EMTs, don't call the police and tell them you're being gang stalked electronically. Just don't do it.
I have read what you're supposed to do is if this is happening to you and you feel pain and you need to go get help for that pain, that what you would do is go and just describe your symptoms of the pain. Don't say, also I'm hearing voices, I think I'm being gang stalked, microwave weapons. Just go in and describe the physical symptoms of what you're feeling and how that's affecting you, because the majority of the medical and law enforcement community, unfortunately, has not been educated on this topic, but they have been educated on if someone tells me they're hearing voices, that person needs a crazy suit and a padded room.
Yeah,
and they have been educated on 96-hour holds, and they have been educated on how many antidepressants can I shove down your throat. So just know that and realize that if this is happening to you, all of everything I've read has said that you do not mention the actual acts themselves. You mention the symptoms that you're having from it, unless you are physically being stalked in a way that you can show evidence, like here's pictures of this license plate, these people have been following us. But the problem is, too, I mean, it's just so multifaceted, this thing, because that guy that Dr. John described, he was a former FBI person who obviously has cover within the state government here because he's allowed to continue doing that with a completely unblemished record, even though multiple people have put official complaints against him at the actual government office.
They have,
so
but you could still put political pressure. If they're using a lot of former FBI, we're going to be able to catch. It's going to be possible.
I mean, and
you start putting pressure on them, we could politically expose them. I'm serious.
I just want to say this too. Before we go, because we're way over time, I just want to say this too. To the people that are involved in this, former FBI, what have you, please consider the fact that you are still a human being, even if you've become this master agent of the government that you feel is you're working for is so good, or whatever it is that you tell yourself to justify this existence that you now have decided to lead. You are still a human being, and these people are still human beings that you're doing this to, And ultimately, if you are willing to do that to them, trust me when I say 100,000% that the people above you will do the same exact thing to you, your family, your children, your wife, your mother, your grandmother, anyone you care about is on the table just as much as these people that you are victimizing are on the table, because ultimately this is about controlling everyone, and they will throw you under the bus so fast it will make your head spin around until it falls off, okay? So you really should just consider what you're doing and consider the fact that you have the power to stop this and expose it. And that's really what you should do, is reconnect with your humanity, find something in yourself that's still good, because at our hearts we all are, and exercise that and bring yourself back to humanity and take your morality back and just rise up against this disgusting display, because as you continue to become a part of it, you are going to become the abyss, and you will be targeted just like everyone else, and so will everyone you care about, because ultimately this is about everyone, and you'll be part of that. So you are not safe, you are not protected just because you're a minion of the system. They will throw you under the bus just like they do everyone else, because that is what these people do. They do not care about you. They do not care about you, and they don't think that what you're doing is, they will replace you in 5 seconds. You are nothing to them. So really just consider the fact that you should stand on the side of humanity and the side of good.
And on that level, I would say obviously we are talking to people. They're dealing with high technology used against people targeted. There's seemingly no way out of it. But do not give in to the despair, the hopelessness, or the fear. Those are the lowest states of human consciousness. That's really where they would like to get most of the population.
They would like everyone to be down there at the bottom of the pyramid.
Human beings are capable of dynamic, incredible things, and you can feel it surging through your body when you tap into it. Seek the higher, go with love, trust your instincts, and do not cave into fear, intimidation, or bullying, even if it seems like you can never get it to stop. Just don't back down. Be strong enough, and they can't target us all. They want us to feel like we're in a ubiquitous Big Brother state, a panopticon where everyone is totally watched at every moment and there's no escape. Their trial ballooning technology they want to roll out on everyone.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine when this connects to the smart grid?
Let's be strong enough to make this fail. Let's find a way, because I guarantee you could find funding somewhere and prove this. I'm certain of it.
Well, I think we should leave it there for now, but this is not something that I'm going to stop writing about. And this is not something that we're going to just let go of. So we want to help people. We care about this issue. This is very important. We do not think you're crazy. And we're going to continue to write about this. So
thanks for listening, everybody.
We'll talk to you later.